Hello, welcome to the third session of this CSS for Dummies course. It's an absolute basic course for beginners. In this course, now we're going to talk about something called understanding between HTML and CSS. Now, the idea here is very simple. We have been using HTML, but why we need CSS and how we differentiate between what content we create using HTML and what content we create between CSS. So this is something that we need to understand. So before we go further, we need to be very clear about exactly what HTML is and what CSS is and how we basically differentiate between these together. Only then we would be able to understand, okay, what the advantage and benefits of CSS are. So basically, let's just clarify very quickly what exactly we mean by HTML and what exactly we mean by CSS. Okay, and then we will go and discuss more about what CSS is. Okay, so now when we talk about HTML, basically HTML we use for structuring the data. We have been using the word we call structuring the data. Now, what do we mean by structuring? Structuring means we have used tags, okay, and those tags basically allow us to create and structure the content on a web page. However, the design element was missing from the day one. Designing like color, like backgrounds, like foregrounds, like borders, like alignment, like placement. CSS does that. CSS adds that design elements to our basic structure. Now, why these two are important eventually is because CSS does not structure the content. The data itself, it's provided by HTML. So data goes inside HTML. HTML structures that data, and then that structural element is going to CSS for design purpose. So we use primarily CSS for design purpose, not structuring the data. Data itself is done by HTML. This is what the key thing that we have to understand, that no matter what, we would still be using HTML. HTML is something that we consider as irreplaceable. What we mean by that is that you cannot replace HTML. You need eventually HTML to structure your data. Okay, so data is basically being structured using HTML tags. So we structure the data, we put the data on our HTML, then we use CSS. So CSS will read this HTML content and design it. Okay, so it will design those content area. It will give that color, it will give that border, it will give that life to that HTML data. Okay, so this is why CSS is quite important. CSS does not create the data. CSS does not work with the data. It is only there to design your data. What exactly we mean by design? Let me show you in another example. So if I come to this particular web page, now you would notice this is a very simple HTML web page, but notice the design of it. This design, the background color, the menu items, the sidebar, the page themes, the alignment, everything is basically designed using CSS. Okay, however, this text as welcome to my homepage is HTML. This is an HTML tag. These links have been created using HTML tag, but the design itself is what we refer to as CSS. So if I click on no sheet, now this is pure HTML. So what you see now here is what we call a pure HTML design content area. So we use a heading tag, we use the list items, we use another heading tag, and we create simple tags. So this is what HTML looks like without any CSS. Okay, so this is a simple HTML without any CSS. This is what we say. We need HTML to create and structure our data, put the data on a web page, but we use CSS purely to create this design. So this same content has been changed into something called CSS, and this CSS will give us that design. So without CSS, we cannot design our web page properly. So that's what two things that we need to understand. Whenever we work with HTML or web development as a journal, we use HTML to put the data on a web page, then we come to CSS. Then we learn about CSS that, okay, how do I create this menu item? How do I create this sidebar? So we just use HTML and we put the text here. This is like a heading, this is like paragraph, but then we use CSS to design this into a sidebar. Then if I scroll down, this is like a footer area. So how do we design it? We use HTML to create a paragraph, but then giving a border around it, giving a background around it, this is where CSS comes into play. Then we can switch between different styles. Now see what happens. Same HTML, the tags did not change, the content did not change, same HTML page, exactly same. We did not even change, we just told it that use this different style now. So using the same style, this same HTML page now has a different style to it. Exactly same HTML, same tags, no change in the HTML. We just change the way it looks. We change the background color. We change the fonts. We change the layout. Now there's no sidebar. The menus are now appearing on the right side instead of the left side. The bars are completely different. The footer is completely different. This is what CSS does. Then if we go inside this, another idea, look at now the menus are appearing on the top. It has a green text, these headings, the texts are different. This sidebar is appearing at the bottom, which has a certain different text, and the footer is there. See, this is what CSS does for us. We create a simple HTML and then we apply different styles to it. This is what our CSS looks like. This is what CSS or the power of CSS is. Okay, so this is what we do. So we take a simple HTML and then we apply various different styles to it. So HTML is there. We're learning HTML as we go along. I have already uploaded a complete course. So if you haven't understood HTML, go through that course. The link would be in your description or in your resources link. You can find that course. HTML is must. So you have to understand how we put the content, because only then we would be able to properly style the content. Okay, so that's one thing. So I hope you understand the difference. Okay, HTML is there for structuring the data. We write the HTML text to create a simple structure. Then we use styles. CSS is going to style this content in a way. So throughout this course, we're going to learn how we create these menus, how we're going to use CSS to create these wonderful different styles for our particular web page. Okay, so let's start learning more about CSS from next class.